It was this amazing experience of meeting women from all over the world, and at that time, I just remember how revelatory the conversations were because everyone was coming from different perspectives. There was no real global dialogue, even though there had been a conference 2 decades, each decade for 2 before that, starting, I believe, in Mexico City, or the last one had been there. And so I remember one conversation where women from the West were saying, we have to be able to have jobs in untraditional roles like construction, and just thinking many of the women from the developing world were looking like, why are you trying to get the jobs that we are left with in our country that are so hard and so labor intensive, and saying this is the traditional role like in India, and this kind of, really talking past each other. And I think that has changed, Tom. So I'll just say that I think this evolution of a global dialogue and the connectedness between women, and if you go online, the way young women are connecting across the world, and this kind of raising of expectations for women has gone really well. And as head of the United Nations World Food Program, I spent much of my last decade in places like Somalia and Afghanistan, and I would always meet with women separately, and they had dreams, and I don't know that that was always true. What struck me when Aamina spoke, she said, leave no one behind. And what does that mean? And so when you ask that question, in some places we're going backwards. In some places there's a tragic reality for girls. In many places, girls are still the last to get a piece of food, and often they don't get it. And the cycle of malnutrition starts in the womb. And sometimes girls aren't welcomed in the world, and we still see that. And so this disempowerment that's happening, or certainly in the Middle East today, we see women being ripped from their families and auctioned off. So there's great progress, and I think the awareness has risen. And just where I do think we're not at a 10, but we're getting there, is a real recognition, I think, in the global economy that women are the key to turning things around. And so this idea that where women have often been excluded from property and from bank accounts and from being able to start businesses, and still there's these legal blocks, that you see global enterprise really rallying to say, women are the best bet now, and so how do we change this? And that's, I think, very hopeful.
Aamina, I won't hold you to a number because Josette kind of danced around it, but that was a great answer, so we'll,
No, I think that we're not there yet and we can't quantify success yet. I remember I was 10 years old when the Beijing conference happened.
Don't rub it in.
I know. I remember in my social studies class we spoke about it because the week before we had talked about 1908 and what that meant to the United States, and how that year in this very city over 15,000 women marched the streets of New York City asking for voting rights, asking for equal pay. And then my teacher had mentioned this Beijing conference, and I was like, it's so far away, I don't really know what's going on over there. 20 years later, now that I've more or less, I think of myself as a gender specialist, I've studied gender development, I work at UN Women, I'm quite passionate about girls and women's issues. 20 years later, we still do not have any single country in this world that is gender equal. And I think Ambassador Revere in this film said it best in the sense that it's a journey. You look at some countries that have made great progress, and then we look at a lot of countries where they're simply lagging behind. And I think Aamina was right to bring up the kidnapping of those girls in Boko Haram, because it shows that there is still a lot of resistance out there towards the equality of girls and women. And that's what makes me a little bit sort of anxious,